So good to be here with you rocks and clouds folks. Danielle Roshi and I go way back, I think, to the 90s. So it's a pleasure to be here with his students. And Wonder Wheel Sensei, the water dragon, and we never met in the flesh world, but lots of online connections, and I found him to be a very like-minded Dharma person, like-minded Dharma heart, and some Vine students. Still going to have to get up and do zazen in the morning. By the way, we have Chosan too. So yeah, let me talk a little bit, and then let's talk together. And For Mike's introduction, I want to talk about this way of awakening and post-awakening training, especially for householders. And it's something that I have put quite a bit of time in, especially this last 10 years, a little more than 10 years. We've been working on the Vine of Obstacles Zen. And people thought we were kind of crazy when we started. And now everybody's on Zoom. So it's kind of funny how things go, I think the biggest thing, we focus on Zazen study engagement like everybody. But I think the biggest thing we do is we have commitments and integrity around those commitments, and a training container for people to enter into and abide within. And then in-person sesshin as well. So a good deal of my time is spent working with Vine students who do practice meetings every week with everybody, working together with my wonderful teaching partner, Tetsugan Sensei, who's also my wife. And we actually give most talks together. So this is, these days when I give a talk alone, I feel a little alone, and it's kind of fun to go back and forth. So I think I'm more serious when I'm alone. So you've got that to look forward to. And then another thing that I do with my time is I like to hang out with long dead Zen masters. And especially I've got this kind of thing for these 13th century Zen masters, a very interesting period at this point of transition from China to Japan. And has a lot to do, a lot to say about our Zen project now. So I found myself, very much interested, and I very much enjoy, really. It's one of the things I just really enjoy doing, hanging out with Zen masters like Zhu and Wansong, Hongzhu. And it occurred to me earlier that translating is kind of like a mouth-to-mouth resuscitation, where you try to bring these long dead corpses to life, through this body. So tonight I thought we'd focus on Linji's Great Satori, and I'm grateful to Mike for pointing out the importance of our householder practice. And one thing just to note, that the Zen narrative is so much about the monastic stories, right? So many monastic stories. And so it can get confusing. But so many people nowadays, like 99% or so of practitioners, including 99% of serious practitioners, in my opinion, are householders. So that narrative's got to change, of course. And in changing a narrative, it's important that it be grounded and based on some really thorough understanding of the tradition. And so my role is largely about the tradition. And so tonight I want to talk about Linji's Great Satori. Linji's Great Satori. And this is from what you probably call the Book of Serenity, do you? The Book of Serenity. And I call the Record of Empty Hall, just to be oppositional, not the Record of Empty Hall. That's a different book. I gotta get these texts straight. I call it the Record of Going Easy. That's serenity, where it is the character for serenity is there. It's something, something like going easy. The water dragon didn't really agree with my translation. I'll note that, but I stuck with it anyway. So the Record of Going Easy, case 86, is what I want to dig into, and I'd like to go through the whole thing. I don't know if we'll have time to go through it. It wasn't my intention to get into the project of translating these cases and commentaries, but it's really had its way with me. So it looks like that's my next main project here in my translating life. I prefer Satori, by the way, rather than awakening or enlightenment. This is something we might talk about during the discussion. On the one hand, it's nice to have English words, but on the other hand, they've got to be accurate. We don't, for example, use Dharma, or we use Dharma. We don't translate Dharma because Dharma has this thing about being both the truth, the teaching, the phenomena, and the way of doing things. And if somebody can come up with an English word that captures those four nuances, well, you're great. I'll bow down to you. But Satori is kind of the opposite case, because we have awakening, we have English or enlightenment, but culturally we have many understandings of what those words mean. So rather than one word meaning many things, as with Dharma, with Satori, we have, or enlightenment, awakening, we have many understandings of what this one very specifically, clearly defined so-called thing is in the Zen tradition. And when we use terms like awakening or enlightenment, we invite these cultural projections, and it's a mess. So I think it's helpful, and I propose, this is a new thing for me, that we use Satori and Kensho, as Mike said earlier, some of the traditional words. Kensho actually isn't used that much in the classical period. Satori, much more common. But for example, in Bodhidharma's verse about what Zen is about, Kensho Jobutsu, see nature become Buddha. It's right there in the heart of the tradition. So why focused on Linchi? Well, first of all, one of the formative narratives of the tradition. It's very important that we dig into the ancient tradition in this process of transition, as I said. And through that process of digging into the tradition, we can clarify the current corruptions by steeping ourselves in the ancient corruptions. is what the process is. So we know where we're coming from by studying the ancient path. And it's also a way of showing gratitude and respect for the received tradition, rather than kind of reflexively moving into changing stuff before we're deeply steeped in it. In this case, also, when we work with this case, the Linchi's Great Satori, from the point of view of the Record of Going Easy, the Record of Going Easy is a collection that was collected by Hongzhi, known as Tiantong in the text itself, for the monastery that he mostly taught at. And Wansong, who I've been working with for some years now, and Going Through the Mysteries 100 Questions is a Wansong text. These were both Soto or Saodong teachers from the Hongzhi, or the 12th century, Wansong from the 13th century. And so we view Linchi's enlightenment, Satori, from that perspective. And so questions arise like how do they view it? How do these old guys view Linchi's awakening? And so that's a question I encourage you to focus on. And also in classical times, in this period of transition from China to Japan, what were the differences between lineages? And after studying this point for about 45 years, Katagiri Roshi told us that he thought that what we should do is go back to the Zen of the sixth ancestor. Not something we can actually do, but the spirit is there, not to get caught in sectarian divisions. In my view, I think the difference between Linchi and Saodong or Rinzai and Soto in the classical period was like the difference between Haagen-Dazs chocolate ice cream and Ben & Jerry's chocolate ice cream. You can sample it, taste test it. It's like, maybe it's not exactly the same, but what's the difference? So these practitioners trained in the same monasteries, they had the same forms, they wore the same clothes, they did the same practices. There's essentially chocolate ice cream. Wansong was the teacher that did the commentaries in this collection, and he was no stranger to great Satori. And briefly, let me tell you his story. So he first had a glimpse, an intimation of awakening with his first teacher, Shengmo, and then he went and studied with Zhui Yan. And Zhui Yan, a teacher in the Saodong Soto tradition, gave him a koan. Of course, he gave him a koan. The koan he gave him was not yet thoroughly realized, which I really like. So, he's probably 20 years old. He's had a little kensho already, and the teacher gives him the koan, not yet thoroughly realized. So, and one day, Zhui Yan, to spur him on, maybe he's, kind of wasting time. He says he's going to do it, but he's doing other things, You know how it is. Zhui Yan says, you wait for a horn to grow from your head until your hands and feet grow teeth and claws. That's what you're doing. You're just waiting. So, and then he hit him. Boom. So, this is a Saodong teacher. So he struck him with his staff. Wansong goes away later that day. He's in a courtyard somewhere, and he sees a rooster take off, flying and crowing at the same time. This is an unusual thing. For those of you who don't know chickens, I grew up with chickens. I don't know if I ever saw a rooster take off, flying and crowing at the same time, but it happened. And with that, Wansong had a great Satori. And he came back to Zhui Yan and he said, today I not only seized the old tiger, I seized the great tiger. Zhui Yan said to him, in that case, I laugh with you. You were born with teeth and claws, but their sharp points were not yet revealed. Mountains and rivers revolve, yet every inch hits the mark. You have the special spirit of a lone rhinoceros passing through. And then he gave him a verse called the Seal of Profound Accord. At midnight, a golden rooster took off crowing. It's not enough to rouse a secluded person from a dream. Clouds break up as the moon, the stars, and the Big Dipper quake. Seize the great tiger, the eye of unhindered freedom. And that whole unhindered freedom thing will become important also in our case, Linchi's great enlightenment. So in the record of Going Easy, we have these 100 cases that were gathered together by Hongshu, great master, well known today and for the last 1,000 years, really. And he pulled these cases together and then wrote verses. And then almost 100 years later, Wansong came along and wrote introductions, capping phrases, and commentaries to the whole works, following Yuan Wu and the Blue Cliff Record. So it becomes this massive, interrelated, interconnected, dynamic Dharma presentation. So they begin with these words presenting to the assembly, saying, this is Wansong. Cleary calls these pointers, but pointers sounds like the person is saying, it's over there, I'm going to get to it, right? But that's not what, there's no pointer in the original characters. It's presenting to the assembly, and presenting could be showing it. So these introductions are really important. They show what's coming. And here's this one. He says, this is one song. A copper head and an iron forehead, heavenly eyes and dragon eyeballs, eagle's beak and fish cheeks, a bear's heart and leopard guts. Under the diamond double-edged sword, no calculation is acceptable. Right? How can you calculate that? Heavenly eyes and dragon eyeballs, eagle's beak and fish cheeks, and it's like, what? It's disruptive, it's disjunctive, it's disturbing even, So it's just exactly, it's not only what's coming, it's what is. No calculation is accepted, he says. All schemes to get it fail. Why is it this way? Why? And then he jumps into the case. I think I'll skip over the capping phrases. I think those are too much for tonight. So I'm just going to see what I can do without doing the capping phrases. They are quite wonderful, and they're like Wansong, hundreds of years later, enters the case. That's what the capping phrase practice is, to enter the case and play within the case, embracing and poking the participants. Linji asked Wangbo, what is the essential meaning of the Buddha Dharma? The essential meaning of the big idea. What's the essential meaning? Wangbo struck him. Boom. 3 times, Linji went in and asked, what is the essential meaning of the Buddha Dharma? 3 times, Linji struck him. Boom. Boom. So then Linji took leave of Wangbo and went to see Dayu. Dayu said, where are you coming from? Linji said, coming from Wangbo. What words and phrases did Wangbo have? Linji said, I asked 3 times about the essential meaning of the Buddha Dharma. 3 times I suffered the stick. I don't know if I was to blame or not. You said, Wangbo is this way, like an old grandmother embracing you. And still, you come and ask if you were to blame or not. With these words, Linji had great satori. So what was it? Linji awakened too. The teacher, Wansong, said, and here's a little backstory first. There's more to this story, and most of the koans are just excerpts from bigger narratives where the old masters have called out the really essential points, sometimes changing it actually to fit their purposes, but they're more elaborate stories. And that's what we're going to go into now. So Zen master Wei Zhao of Zhenchou Linchi Temple was given the posthumous name Zhizhuan, talking about Linji here. He was a person of Nanhua in Saozhou. So he's kind of given his demographics, essentially. His family name was Zeng. He began by studying the sutras and commentaries, but aware that he absolutely wanted a speedy awakening, he went to Huangbo. Aware that he absolutely wanted a speedy awakening, he went to Huangbo. There, he accorded with the assembly for 3 years without seeking instruction from the master. Instead, he dwelled in silence and purity, nothing more. It's very interesting. I think, on the one hand, this great aspiration arises, and he goes to train with Wangbo, but he doesn't ask any questions, right? It's odd, right? It's a disjunctive, it's disruptive. What's he doing? What's he doing? He dwelled in silence and purity, nothing more. The head seat, a monk named Muzhou, has a very large-sized role in the Zen tradition. thought him unusual and different from the assembly, so he exhorted Linji to study and practice. And then Wansong gives us a little digression. He says, I think the version of this in the Inexhaustible Lamp is mistaken. So the Inexhaustible Lamp, by the way, is a text I can't find. There is an Inexhaustible Lamp from the 18th century by Torre, but that certainly isn't it. We're 500 years earlier. So that's just to point out that there are many texts in our tradition that are lost, and there are also many that haven't been translated. And actually, in digging around for another reason, I found a couple other texts in terms of householders, texts from the 18th century. It says this person spent 40 years writing 2 different volumes of great practitioners, 200 men, 200 women, I think. I think there's 200 in both, these 2 volumes of people who had great satori through the up till the 18th century in China. So great resource, untranslated, maybe in 100 years, things like this, they'll get around to translating things like this. So this Inexhaustible Lamp, don't know what this text that tells this story that Wansong doesn't agree with. In it, Wansong says, it said that Linchi lived with Wangbo for 3 years. And during that time, Wangbo would not allow people to ask for instruction. That would be odd, that would be odd, but possible, The teacher was just like, let them sit, man. I'll check in 3 years and see how they're doing. When I was doing sesshin with Daido Lori Roshi, we didn't start dokusan until the 3rd day of sesshin, because he said after some years of leading sesshin, he was tired of people coming in the first 2 days and throwing up on him. So he just stopped, and he'd pick them up after they settled down on the 3rd day and they were ready to work. It's possible. Wansong continues, given Linchi's capacity at the time, he did not seek instruction. That's what Wansong thinks the true story is, but waited for the head seat to tell him to do so. Then he sought instruction. So again, these 2 currents, interesting guy, both wanting a speedy awakening, but not actually doing what he'd need to do to arrive at a speedy awakening. Recognize that contradiction, anyone? So then Wansong, in his Wansongish way, before he gets back to the backstory, he offers us a couple endorsements for Linchi. He says, once I saw Yang Wu Wei, who was a great householder practitioner, his praise for Linchi. And this praise says, a blind donkey extinguishing the true Dharma eye storehouse. Wangbo was too grandmotherly. Dao Yu was too talkative. That's Zen praise. This blind donkey in the treasury storehouse refers to an incident that happened when Linchi died. We won't go into that. He says then, second endorsement, I also saw Fu Guo's praise. Fu Guo is Yuan Wu, his praise for Mu Zhou, who's that head monk who pushed Linchi into going to see Wangbo. This same Mu Zhou is the teacher that the great Yun Men had his first awakening with, reputedly having broken his leg, slamming the door to keep him out of his room. A very different type. Yun Men couldn't be pushed away. He says, and here's this more Zen praise, bitter, hot, severe, growling, biting. He pierced the defeated Linchi and caused him to become a great tree. His rejection pushed Yun Men off a dangerous precipice. His words were like dried firewood. Just had a spark, big flame. Back to the backstory. After Linchi's great satori with Dao Wu, according to the original record, Dao Wu said, reminding you, Dawu in the story, Wangbo's way is like this, like an old grandmother embracing you. And still you come and ask if you were to blame or not. With these words, Linchi had awakening. So then Linchi is like, so actually, it turns out there isn't much to the Buddha Dharma. Yeah, Carol got it. So he asked, what's the big idea? And then with his awakening, it's like, there's really not very much to it. Dayu said, you bedwetting devil, just now you asked if you got along with Wangbo or if you didn't get along. Then you say there isn't much to the Buddha Dharma. How much is coming at you now? And then he leapt at Linchi, grabbed him, and said, speak, speak. Linchi just pressed his fist against Dawu's ribs 3 times, not hitting him. This is a good example for students. He just kind of mimed hitting. You don't have to actually hit teachers. I have no personal interest in this. Anyway, 3 taps like that. Daoyu said, your teacher is Wangbo. I won't interfere with this matter. So then Linchi walked back to Wangbo. If I get where they were, spending a little time looking at this, it's about 900 kilometers, about 600 miles from Wangbo Mountain to Dayu Mountain. 600 miles. Maybe, given all the circumstances that can happen in a walk of 600 miles, maybe you can average 20 miles a day. So take a month, in other words. You might be able to do it faster, but probably even slower, because there's bandits and there's illness and all sorts of stuff happens, So he walked back a month, So this is the old days. People didn't live that long, but they took a lot of their time just to focus on this work. So he walked back to Wangbo. When Wangbo saw him coming, he said, coming and going, coming and going. What have you achieved? Linchi said, it's only because of a grandmother's impatience. Then Linchi told Wangbo what Dayu had said. Wangbo said, that old man Dayu likes to blather. All of a sudden, I'd give him a beating. And she said, that would be something to see. Strike now. And then Linchi came up and smacked Wangbo just lovingly on the cheek, as Wangbo had done with his own teacher, Baishan. Wangbo cried out, laughing, and said, this man's manner is upside down. This man's manner is upside down. He came here to stroke the tiger's whiskers. Linchi then shouted loudly. Won't be his last shout. Wangbo said, attendant, guide this man with upside down manners to the Zazen hall. So you have this juxtaposition of upside down manners and back to the Zazen hall, right? He goes back to where he began. He goes back to dwelling in silence and purity, nothing more. So he has this period, and the stories, the period of silence and purity is often kind of passed over, but I think it's really quite important, that's what set up his ability to awaken with Dayu's words. And then in his post-awakening process, at least part of that was back to dwelling in silence and purity. Then a bit of a digression, but to highlight an important point you might be wondering about. And Wansong then quotes Guishan and Yongshan, who Guishan asked his student Yongshan, did Linchi get Dayu's power or Wangbo's power? In this tradition of face-to-face transmission, right? The lineage from the Buddha through all the Buddhas and ancestors, based on waking up, But it's quite interesting, this really pivotal awakening, and it has, a lot to say also about one school, Zen. She actually woke up with another teacher, and that teacher was in kind of his let's see, Linchi's teacher's teacher was the Dharma brother of Dao Yu's teacher. So, a little complicated, but so it's a little removed. His great uncle's, offspring. Dao Yu, by the way, quite important also in Zen history, because one of Dao Yu's successors is Moshan. Moshan was a woman, and Moshan is one of the few women in this period that was given a place in the records of the lamp. So, very important teacher Dao Yu was. He actually helped Lin Chi awaken, and he also embraced and uplifted women's practice. But you got here kind of a koan kind of question, right? Is it A or B? Koan students will know that you don't go there, So Yangshan said he not only stroked the tiger's whiskers, he woke up sitting on the tiger's head. A nice response that goes through A and B. And then we jump ahead a little bit. We've had the backstory, now a little bit of the after story, and Lin Chi as a teacher. And it's notable that after his Great Awakening, Lin Chi continued to train with Wangbo for quite a while. In this period, things are a little misty still, so we don't really know how long, but he continued to train with Wangbo, maybe until Wangbo died. And then he went on pilgrimage for quite a few years, in which many of the great teachers in this 11th generation, which Lin Chi was a part of, along with Zhaozhou, Deshan, and Yangshan, many of the great teachers in the tradition were this 11th generation. And pilgrimage was really big. So he went on pilgrimage for many years. And then he settled down, taught for 10 years, and died. So Lin Chi's whole teaching career, 10 years, a huge impact. How is that possible? Maybe a half dozen successors. Some of the records say more, but scholars kind of doubt it. They think they're kind of, padding things a bit. But maybe 5 or 6 successors, which ain't bad in a 10-year career. So Lin Chi then, Wansong gives us a taste of Lin Chi as a teacher. And Lin Chi said this. He presented to the assembly, saying, same characters are used as for those introductions. At my late teacher's place, 3 times I asked about the essential meaning of the Buddha Dharma. 3 times I suffered a beating, like being brushed with a wormwood branch. These days, I still think about getting a beating. Would anyone like to lend a hand? By the way, we have a disjunctive element here also. You had a beating, but it's with a wormwood branch, which is artemisia, right? Anybody got that in their garden? It's like kind of like a fern, So it's like getting a beating with a fern. It's not much of a beating. It's not like getting beaten with an oak branch, like you might think, or one of these. It's getting beaten with something that's just giving you a brush kind of sensual experience. So he's being clever, I think, there, or saying what it felt like on the inside. But he challenges his community. Would anyone like to lend a hand? Great, huh? Really wanting to connect. Come forward. A monk came forward and said, I'll lend a hand. And she grabbed his staff and began to hand it to the monk. And just as the monk reached to grab it, you know what happened? Boom, 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 boom. Lin Chi hit him. Later, Uedo commented, Lin Chi's letting go place is dangerous, and he gathers in extremely fast. So let's see. About 7 minutes for the verse, not much time. Here's the warm-up for the verse. Tiantong, author of the verse, sees how parent and child were unconstrained, unlike the crowd. Wangbo's functioning was transmitted through Linqi. So Tiantong picks the most important point from which to produce a verse. I think what I'll do is, well, let's see, I'll give you the verse and then we'll go from there. Here's the verse. A phoenix with 9 features, 1,000-mile colt, a flute that blows true elegance. Marvelous function arises at the pivot. The time will come when lightning will fly right in your face. When the clouds of confusion break open, a solitary sun remains, stroking the tiger's whiskers. You see, no? A truly grand, imposing person. Who's he talking about? So you've got these first things: the phoenix with 9 features, and the 1,000-mile colt. Rather than hesitating and taking time, I'll just jump into it. So here's the 9 features of the phoenix. It's a lot like the presenting to the assembly at the beginning. Phoenix have 9 features, said Wansong, and this is according to a text called Illustrations of Auspicious Omens, an old Taoist text. One of the things that we can talk more about maybe in the discussion is how Wansong uses these texts of Taoists, Confucians, various. He has a very wide reach, actually. Lots of Dharma references from all the various schools, not only Zen, but Sutra references. So he's just pulling out whatever works to make the point, help people awaken. And there's no judgment that I hear about, using things. So it's like quoting Walt Whitman, quoting Denise Levertov, whatever, whatever comes up that's helpful is used as a Dharma text. First one, everybody knows, phoenix returns to life. Second, the mind of the phoenix unites with the limit, with the utmost. In other words, the mind of the phoenix carries beings across. Third, the phoenix ears penetrate hearing. Fourth, their tongue is subtly articulate. Fifth, they are the color of bright light. Sixth, the phoenix has a short vermilion crest. Seventh, the phoenix has sharp talons. Eighth, their cry arouses the wind. And ninth, their bellies hold their families. Very strange being. I imagine maybe it's like a kangaroo. It doesn't say, but that's a very literal translation. So maybe there's a pouch in the belly that holds their family. That's all I can. And so that's what I come up with. And this is a description of Lin Chi's great functioning. Wansong goes on. This is a metaphor for Lin Chi's genius level supernormal functioning. That's what he says. Going 1,000 miles in a day. Yet only after Satori did he know the true pivot for great functioning. And that's really the point that I wanted to get to, at least in this verse. That's the purpose of, great awakening, great Satori. It's to be able to find this true pivot for great functioning, to benefit, to awaken, to liberate living beings, so-called great compassion. That's the point. Sometimes in the Zen school, you hear that, or about the Zen school, sometimes teachers within Zen say Zen is not about compassion, that we have to borrow compassion practices from other schools and things like that. Complete nonsense. It's zombie lineages that don't have the transmission right here. This is the heart of it. Maybe compassion isn't the word that's used, but why else would there be a true pivot of great functioning but to liberate beings, to carry them across? Flute that blows true elegance. We'll just kind of skip over that. You have this lightning in your face and the clouds of confusion breaking open. The solitary sun remains, stroking the tiger's whiskers. And then in the 8th line, very interesting, Hongzhi leans forward to us through, excuse me, almost 1,000 years. Like, you see, no, do you get it? You're with me. I can feel his heart. And Wansong says, Tian Tong appears to be pointing it out for people, insisting that those who study and practice experience all-encompassing, awe-inspiring great function. What a line, huh? I think this is great. All-encompassing, awe-inspiring great function. This is the, Saodong teacher praising Lin Chi and inviting us to do it. Such practitioners, he says, are unwilling to pass on their responsibility to others. This is called a kesa-wearing monk with a nose hook. This nose hook we had, some of you were at Sushi in the summer, and so it's like an ox with a ring in its nose. So you're capable of being trained. So on the one hand, there is this expression of great freedom, but the other foci here that makes it work is being a person that's capable of being trained. You have a nose hook. So that kind of balances and digests this person with upside down manner. And then the last line, a truly grand and imposing person. And Wansan comments saying, still, what portion do you see of Lin Chi's state of Satori? Then he notes, shame killed the new bride of Heiyang. It startles back to life the grandmother Zen of Muta. These references are obscure. Cleary doesn't seem to understand where they're coming from either. Could kind of make a guess about this shame killed the new bride of Heiyang. But the idea is in reflecting on ourselves, so much to see yet, so much awakening yet, life after life, let's do it. And that's the startled back to life, the grandmother Zen of Muta, so first, some sense of shame, which from the point of the Buddha Dharma is can be a wholesome Dharma. It's actually, it can go either way. Shame can be damaging or wholesome. And in this case, it can be wholesome when we look at ourselves and go, we work to do, and then let's do it. So that's it. The heart of the great tradition of Zen is awakening and post-awakening training in order to refine all-encompassing, awe-inspiring great function for the benefit of all the many beings. What do you do here, Mike, for Q&A? That's what I'm ready for.
So I want to just say thank you so much, Roshi Dosho Port, and maybe since we've done the Zen version of the way that we appreciate, maybe we can do the American version too, and just give him a nice hand for a talk. Wonderful translation. We're open to question and answer, and Roshi Dosho Port, if you would like to just call on people as they raise their hand, that's a beautiful way to do that. If you would rather me to kind of feel that if people would like to put things in the chat or to kind of talk with me, I'm happy to do that. Do you have a preference, personally?
Raise.
Perfect. So feel free to raise a hand and make a comment or ask a question, and let's go deep into the heart.
I confess that when Mike invited me to come, I had the time zones confused, so I thought it would be at 5:30. But
it's an absolute blessing that you're here. Thank you, and I realize that there's a surreal quality in the middle of the night. Thank you. It's a blessing. I really honor you for being here.
I was concerned that I might do what Kobanchino is reputed to have done once, which was fallen asleep during his own Dharma talk. But I consider myself, I consider the talk a success, and I didn't fall asleep yet. So somebody, let's go. Joe, Daicho, what about you?
I was thinking about the lynchy and the striking. Cultural thing, or would it actually be a good means if you could get away with striking us? Would that actually be helpful, do you think?
It was kind of hard online, but we do use the Kyosaku some. We don't actually, our style isn't to use it in the Zendo, but we do use it in Dokusan some. And I think there isn't a replacement for it. That's what I think. Harada-Yasutani Roshi told me, don't let the Kyosaku die. Don't let the Kyosaku die. Whatever happens, don't do it. I think that's good advice. It's hard to read through the centuries whether it's culture or not. I suspect that it's very disruptive in their culture because it's Confucian culture and lots of respect for seniors, and so it's against the precepts. These are monks that are living by 250 precepts. So that's why it's like, and he comes up and Lynchy comes up and slaps Wangbo. As I said, as Wangbo had come up and slapped Baizhang at the end of the Wild Fox Koan, right? So we have this lineage transmission going on, but it's very shocking. So it's upside down guy, take him out of here.
Also, Roshi, you said that shame can be harmful or helpful. Shame if you then think you can't do it, right?
But,
right.
Yeah, right. If you get stuck on, I'm a piece of shit, that's not helpful because you're not. It's delusive. That's not true. But if you get stuck on, I'm great, that's problematic too. But shame can be helpful. If it's based basically on some ego strength from our contemporary kind of way of using these words. If you have some ego strength, then at that moment, then that kind of reflection and a feeling of shame can be helpful, motivating. Jim Shogun, you're next.
Thank you, Roshi. At the beginning of your talk, you were talking about how you don't like the word enlightenment or awakening and that you prefer satori. Would you expand on that, please?
Did I say I didn't like it? I mean, I like those words fine, but I could have said that, but I don't remember saying that. But like I said, I don't know if I can say more about it, Jim Shogun, or not, but it's just that, and when I talk with people about awakening and students come and talk about past experiences, and that's the bigger problem. And, my life is quite focused in working with students that are interested in doing this work intensively. So I'm really not really talking about the broader cultural implications of it all, but in terms of people that are really engaged in the practice, people come and say, I had this big experience, on top of this hill and and sometimes it's like, oh, maybe it is. There's some, Kensho Satori element to it. Maybe it's just a peak kind of boon experience that then becomes a prison for a person. So we wouldn't call an experience, in our shared tradition through like Yasutani Roshi and Harada-Dainin Roshi, we wouldn't even call an experience. It's actually not an experience, Kensho or Satori. It's something you can do. That's what Kensho and Satori are. Awakening and enlightenment, I think in English, refer to an experience. So we're actually, it's kind of a different category that we're working in. And so there's this kind of miss, I can't tell you how many people over the years, it's dozens that have come to me and said, I've already had an awakening experience. But almost none of them can pass through the first checking question for Mu. Maybe 2 or 3 have, but most not. So, and there's many experience, many reasons that you might come up with for that, but that's what I've seen. So using a word that's helpful in terms of the practice, and I think Kensho Satori, those words are helpful in terms of the practice. Carol, good to see you.
Yes, thank you very much for coming. It's very nice to see you too. I don't want to take you too far off track, but you briefly referenced something from Bodhidharma. in your talk. It's wiped out from my memory what you said, but I had a dream about Bodhidharma coming to instruct me a few days ago, and I'm looking for something. I'm looking for, where can I find his collected works or sayings somewhere, and can you tell me what book I should find?
Email me and I will.
Okay.
There's a Broughton book, but I'm not remembering the exact translation right now. Maybe it's something like Bodhidharma Anthology. Broughton is good. Red Pine, not so good because it's not so precise. The translation isn't very focused and precise. Broughton's translations are a little strange, but they're very technically correct. So I'd
Thank you.
go with that.
Yeah, thanks. I'll email you. Thanks.
Bodhidharma is never off track. He's, his line, Kensho Jobutsu, see nature become Buddha, is what I mentioned, the fourth line of that.
That's it. Yes.
Verse. Great that Bodhidharma came to you in a dream.
Yeah. It was Gregory.
Yeah.
Hey. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Carol. What else?
Any advice on doing some practice to make you accident prone for those moments of intimacy or those moments of opening or those kensho moments? And maybe any words on the kind of the kenshos that feel like you just scraped a little clarity off the glass and can see a little brighter versus a kensho where it feels like something was radically transformed in a way. Those are two little nudges.
Couple of things there. Well, lots of zazen. So lots of zazen is the foundation of the tradition in our lineage, particularly Yasutani Roshi makes a big deal of that in his Genjo Koan commentary, for example, which we just studied. It's also helpful to have some study thing going on, so to be cooking with something, following that vein, and working with a teacher as you are, those are very important. Zazen, hour a day is good. 2 hours is better. If you can do 3 hours of zazen, wonderful. So, and that's the problem. I mean, and I'm talking about householders that, to be able to do that. And actually, most people can do that in their life. Most people can do 2 hours if they make it a priority, but you have to make it a priority and you have to make choices not to do other things. You have to decide not to go to every family function. Frankly, you can't do it otherwise. I'm sorry, that's just a fact that if you think you can make every family function and experience great awakening and complete the post-kensho process, maybe, but the chances are so slim that it would be like meditation malpractice for me to say that, oh yeah, no problem. I think it's a big problem. So if you really want to do this work, you have to focus on it. And we see that in the awakened householders in the past, people that really focused on the work, and not just on the cushion, also. So for some householders and some teachers, Dahui, for example, the great master from the 12th century, Dahui, who essentially, started the headword Wato key phrase method. He hardly, for householders, he doesn't even hardly recommend zazen. And it's an example which I mention quite often, but as a minister who gets really inspired and wants to really go deeply, comes to him and says, like, I'm going to quit being he's like the president of the country. It's like, I'm going to quit and go to the monastery. What do you think? And Dahui says, well, that would be too bad because you'd be leaving the material for your awakening behind. So don't do it. Stay right there. Stay right in it. And from time to time, if you get a chance, do some zazen. I feel like it. After we were studying that, one of the Vine students was like, is this okay? I mean, is it okay for Dahui to say that? I mean, this is Zen. Yeah, it's okay. So, yeah, you asked a second question there, Mike. I don't know if I got to it or not. Did I?
It was really wonderful. Thank you. I appreciate your answer. Minor, just question before passing the neti would be, do you have any advice for working on work that's like very focused and physical seems closer to zazen, work that's cognitive seems a little bit further from zazen? Any way to kind of practice with work that might be like computer work, thinking work? I mean, I am imagining some translation as a cognitive focus, and I'll pass to Nettie.
Yeah. So the dualism is in you, not in the work. So so really drop the separation. You know, it's just the present object. So no difference. And it's more advanced practice probably, but so what, right? Hello. Is that Nettie?
Yes. Hi, Dosho Port. I don't know if you know of me, but my
I
teacher,
do know
Kokyo.
of you.
Right.
Yes. You received transmission from Kokyo, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. Kokyo is a very good friend of mine. Nice to meet you.
He's a very good person, that one.
Very good person. And also he's like one of the smartest people in the world. He went through one of my books and there's a phrase that was like necklaces, vases, and something. And he's like, that's from the Nirvana Sutra, page 290, you know.
Yeah.
And it was. I
Yeah.
mean, it
And
literally was necklaces, jewels, and cups or something. And he remembered from the sutra. I'm
yeah.
sorry, Eddie, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's he and I then are a great example of how you can be incredibly varied and still embrace the Dharma, because I'm comparatively pretty stupid. And yet he and I are great buddies. And so you can be incredibly different and it still all works out if you've got that focus on wanting to see into the truth of things for the benefit of all beings. It doesn't matter if you've got academic skills or not, it doesn't matter at all. So the thing I just thought of as you were speaking before is, I think koan work is incredibly beneficial for householders because you can make it the center of your life. I raised 3 children during the working with the curriculum. Driving the car, I'm memorizing my case. I've got a piece of paper, adding one line at a time at the traffic light, glance down. What's the next sentence? Okay, add that sentence. Driving along, next traffic light. You look forward to a traffic light because then you can look down, get another sentence, add that. So you can totally take it into your ordinary life while you're doing the dishes, while you're putting gas in the car. I'm often sort of encouraging my students when they say, I don't know if I can do this. I think is perfect for householders.
Agreed.
Because instead of filling your mind with a whole lot of random stuff, you can just be reciting your case and just contemplating it and just letting it work on you. And it doesn't matter what you're doing. There's always a little bit of mental space, a little place where you can take a breath. And just to Mike's, I think you're right, Mike, it is a little harder in a way when you've got cognitively oriented work, because it's a little harder to get that space. You have to kind of take an intentional breath. Whereas if you're doing manual work, it can be a little easier, or if you're breastfeeding a child or something, it's a little easier. There's a little more mental room. But every moment is a perfect moment anyway. So
Agreed.
it doesn't matter. Doesn't
And it
matter.
was, and the koan work was designed with that in mind. It
Yeah.
was designed
Yeah.
for householders. That's the Tao. He designed it specifically for that reason.
I
So
didn't know that.
yeah,
I
when
didn't know
folks
that.
say I can't do it because I'm a householder, it's like, well, it was designed for you, actually. Yeah,
But I
was
do agree, and I'm sorry to interrupt because I have to go and pick up one of my grandchildren. But I do agree that sesshin and lots of zazen is really, in my experience, essential. I don't know how you could do it without doing a lot of zazen, and particularly sesshin. At least especially with the early koans, if you're not getting that level of immersion at the beginning of the koan work, I think it would be pretty hard.
agreed. And
Yeah.
you say you and Kokyo are different, but I hear Kokyo and you.
So there you go.